Hey everyone, this is Vic, Vic's Basement Brewcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Of course, brought to you by South Jersey Beer Scene, southjerseybeerscene.com, Facebook, Instagram. Make sure that you do subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is where you'll see this show. I am, for the first time, out here at the beautiful Swedesboro Brewing Company. Really a gorgeous tap room, really nice outside area, and it is my pleasure to be here with the owner, Marvin Bowe. Marvin,
well, thank you.
Welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you. Good to have you. So tell us a little bit about. Well, you know, the name of the brewery is Swedesboro Brewing Company. Tell us a little bit about Swedesboro itself first.
Sure. I moved to Swedesboro about 12 years ago from Columbus, Ohio. And we were looking for a similar demographic to where we were. We're originally from the area, a little further north in Burlington County, Cinnaminson, New Jersey. And when we moved out to Columbus, Ohio, we fell in love with that area. And so we were looking when we were coming back east to find a space that was similar and comparable, had similar culture and values. And we found Swedesboro. I didn't know anything about Swedesboro at the time, and shortly thereafter I kind of fell in love with it. In fact, I was a little surprised at how deep the history was here and how limited the information that I could find on Swedesboro was. So unbeknownst to me at the time, I was actually writing the book for Swedesboro Brewing Company just by being curious about the town. And then, of course, after some time, I fell in love with the town, and I wouldn't have had it any other way but to start it here.
Great, great. Now, tell me about where the genesis, the idea. When did you decide you wanted to open Swedesboro Brewing Company?
Sure, that was about 10 years ago, or somewhere around there. I should probably, people ask me this a lot, I should probably get the date down very specific, but I think it was around 2012. A friend of mine was moving from Palo Alto, California back to Chicago, Illinois. He was a client of mine in my other business, marketing and advertising. And so he asked me, what I'd be doing for the next 3 weeks, and I said, why don't we take a trip across the country instead of moving you just to Chicago? Why don't we map out our tour? And so we spent 3 weeks looking at all the craft breweries from California to Chicago, Illinois. We would have made it on time if it wasn't for hitting Fort Collins, Colorado, and wanting to stay there for an entire week. So, but by the time I got to Omaha, I met a family that started a brewery, and I said to my friend when we were in there that I'm going to open up a brewery someday. I don't know how or when, but it's going to happen.
Cross-country brewery trip. That sounds like heaven to me. You know, my wife actually is watching this tape in here. Do you hear that, dear? Yeah. There's our trip we go. Now, Fort Collins, Colorado, that's where I guess New Belgium started there. New Belgium started there.
Yeah, Odell's, Left Hand, quite a few started out there. Odell's was my favorite. They had, in fact, that's where I started getting the idea of building stories behind the names of the beers. So they had a beer called 90 Shilling, which was the tariff that was put on the beer based on the alcohol by volume back in the day. And so I thought, wow, that's an interesting way of bringing history, because I'm kind of a history nerd, and bringing history into the stories I thought was a really nice touch.
Excellent. That's that really is something that we actually last time we talked. I'm trying to think the last time we talked about a lot of history when we were with Chris Lewis at Oyster Creek. We talked about the history of nuclear plants.
Okay.
In the United States. He's called Oyster Creek because the now decommissioned nuclear plant was like a mile away. So we talked a lot about history with them. So that's always interesting. Now,
I'm sure his beers were glowing.
His beers. Now, this particular tap room, this particular location, was this on your mind, this particular area, like right off the bat when you were here in Swedesboro?
Yeah, actually, surprisingly, things always happen, I think, or seem to work themselves out. So I was actually looking at buying an already existing brewery originally, and I was out in Bordentown looking at a brewery that was called Common Sense at the time.
Okay.
And again, it tied into my history enthusiasm. So this whole Thomas Paine and the pamphlet that started the Declaration of Independence. Anyway, I ended up spending more time than I should have trying to acquire the license by acquisition that I missed an opportunity of buying one of the nicest buildings in Swedesboro. It was a bank in the center of town. And a friend of mine bought the bank, and his original restaurant was here in this space. And
Oh, okay.
so when I talked to him about it, I thought maybe he was just interested in maybe buying it at auction and turning a nice profit. And I proposed to him that I would buy it for the brewery. And he said, well, why don't you take over this space? I'm going to be moving my restaurant in there.
What's the name of that restaurant?
Spicy Affair.
Oh, I think we went past that on the way in. On the way in, we went past
Yeah,
it. Really
Nick-
beautiful looking place.
Nick and Cindy Minhas, great people, great restaurant, and they did an amazing job with the build out. They ended up building it out at the same time we were in 2020. But yeah, we took over their space here and rebuilt this space.
Now, tell us a little bit about your background, Marvin. I know you were a home brewer. Then, you don't do the main brewing here. We're actually going to be visiting the brew house in about 10 minutes or so. We're going to go back and meet Corey, the head brewer, and talk about it. But tell us about what your background is.
Sure. So my background's marketing and advertising. In college, I got my degree in medical illustration. And so when I was going through some of the science courses, we were looking at microbiology, and one of our professors at the time used yeast as a single-cell organism and explained the fermenting process to a bunch of 19-year-olds. And of course, we all went back to our dorms and started fermenting everything we can get our hands on. So orange juice, apple juice, and then we ended up brewing beer in our closet.
Yeast is an amazing little organism. The things that it can do and that it can come up with there. Now, so your background now, actually, your most recent background is in marketing and advertising?
Yep, so I own a small advertising firm. It's in the healthcare sector, healthcare space. That's been my background since I graduated university. And yeah, this was kind of my long-term retirement plan. So I'm priming it now and building it up to hopefully someday. The old expression, if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I was fortunate with my career and still am, but it's kind of a dog-eat-dog world, and there's not a lot of old people in advertising. So I want to make sure that I do everything right, and I kind of ease out of that profession, and as I'm building up this one.
And one of the first things I noticed when I came in, it's easy to say that you have a marketing and advertising background because just the whole setup of the tap room is terrific. I mean, if you look right behind you, we're looking at the whole marketing area there with the display case, with the raccoon. Does the raccoon have a name?
Yeah, his name's Hoppy.
His name is Hoppy the raccoon.
Yeah.
Tell us the story. Where'd you come up with the raccoon? Because I know we have raccoons by us. They're outside eating my wife's birdseed every night. I can see them out there. So tell us about it.
Well, one of the coolest things about a raccoon is it's one of the few animals that actually has opposing thumbs, so it can hold a beer, which is pretty cool. So the origin of the raccoon. So we talked a little bit about my interest in history, and when I was kind of learning about Swedesboro, come to find out that this land was inhabited by the Naratican tribe of the Native Americans, and Naratican translates into English speaking as raccoon. So some of the earlier settlers, the Swedes and the Finns that came here, referred to the area as Raccoon Town. So that's where the raccoon came from. It's actually probably the more ideal mascot for the town.
Oh.
Everybody knows of Swedesboro as the Dragons because of Kingsway schools. That's their mascot for the school, but a raccoon really is the kind of origin of the town.
Oh.
We have a Swedish blonde ale that we call New Sweden, and that beer was named after the second name that the town was given. So unofficially, this was referred to as New Sweden as they started settling here in the 1600s. And then when it incorporated, it became Swedesboro and remained that way to this day. So that's really the three names. It was Raccoon Town, unofficially, New Sweden, kind of officially but unofficially, and then Swedesboro.
Okay. Excellent. Great story. And I see the skateboards up on the wall.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we were talking about this earlier. So when I was a kid, I was into two things: BMX bikes and skateboards. And an expression in brewing is, people ask you what beers you have coming on, they say what's on deck. And so I use the deck boards as a way to kind of showcase our session beers or our key beers.
Now I love the labeling that you have on some of the beers. I'm looking at Hopeweizen, Wee Elephant, Brewer Select. what is that, El Mapache?
Yeah, el mapache. That's Spanish for raccoon. So we use that. That's for our Mexican lager.
Okay.
That's Hoppy's Mexican cousin.
Excellent, excellent. Now, as we look around the room, you have display cases that we're looking at, and Johnny, I'm sure you got some shots of the display cases of various beer cans, and unfortunately, due to my age, I recognize some of the beer cans that you have up there. So tell us about the display cases that you have there.
Well, I'll start with the slogan, the greatest beer started as someone's craft. I wanted everybody to realize, both employees and patrons that come in here, that it's still possible to become a great in the world. You know, sometimes when we see a beer that's been around for 100 years, like Budweiser, for example, and just think how unattainable that is. And in their own right, they've secured a place in our culture that will live on forever. But we all have that opportunity. And so I wanted everybody to realize that our goal is to someday see one of our beers in a case like this. So there's always, one of the most popular questions I get asked is, it's really nice you have this kind of small, quaint little space. You really don't want to get too big, do you? And I said, our goal is to make a great beer that everybody can enjoy. I don't know which one, but I hope one of our beers break. And we have, like one of the beer cans in the case is Schlitz. And if you ever read the slogan on the Schlitz can, it says the beer that made Milwaukee famous. And I'd like to someday have a beer that made Swedesboro famous, if we could. Our Kingsway Milk Stout. So another one that I fell in love with out in Colorado, Left Hand, was the first time I experienced a milk stout. And one of the first beers I ever had coming from an Irish family was Guinness. And it's very different than normal beers. So if that's your first beer and your first experience with beer, you're going to have quite a shock when you start tasting all these other styles of beer. That's how different stouts were, at least to me as a kid. It was more like coffee than it was like beer. And so anyway, I had a milk stout from Left Hand, and I fell in love with it. And then I had Victory's Love Stout, and I fell in love with that one. And so when we were designing our beers, I said, let's do a milk stout, make it really smooth on the finish so you don't get that kind of bitter coffee burn. And we spelled Kingsway, naming it after, Kings Highway and Kingsway High School, but we spelled it W-H-E-Y for whey protein. And I said, someday I think it would be awesome if somebody was drinking a Kingsway in Colorado, and to everybody out there, they just thought it was the king of milk stouts. But lo and behold, everybody home saying, that's the beer that made Swedesboro famous.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Great story. I love to hear the stories about what goes on. And now, one other thing that's a little bit different, than I've seen other places. Tell us about your little pony cans that we have. I know Johnny has some pictures that he took of the flight, the graduated flight. It looks almost like a candelabra. Tell us about the little cans that we got there.
Sure. Well, actually, you tied two things together, and appropriately so.
That's what I do, Marvin.
The 8-ounce cans were inspired by the flight. So our flights are really popular here. People love them, and so we designed the flight rack to be easy to kind of distribute in the tap room. But people want to experience that elsewhere, so they're always asking us, how can we bring some of these home with us? And so we came up with this concept of coming out with 8-ounce cans. Unfortunately, they don't sell 4-ounce cans, but 8-ounce cans. So we have it as set up as a flight for two. So we have 8 of our main beers labeled, and we'll sell them out of the cold box here. And you can pick any 4 and take home a variety pack, a flight for 2.
Wow, that's great idea. And you have like the little cards that go with them. You have too.
Yeah.
I know that's there on the flights. Now, did you design the actual logos for those
yes.
also? Yes.
So yep, all the logo work was done in house with our design team. All the concepts were, or most of the concepts, I would say, were a collaboration between my copywriter and me and one of our graphic designers.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we're going to take a little bit break to hear from our friends at BruYou, and we're going to come back. We're going to visit the brew house, talk to Corey, the head brewer, and then we're going to come back here with Marvin and drink some of these beers. We haven't even really talked in detail about any of them, so we will be right back.
Sounds great.
BruYou is the app to send and receive drinks. Buying a drink with BruYou is easy. First, select a recipient, choose the location, and then pick a drink from their menu and send it out. It's easy to stay connected with the people you care about with BruYou. Whether it's a birthday or promotion, or just because, sending a drink with BruYou is great for any occasion. When someone buys you a drink, you'll receive a notification with the details, and the drink will be stored in the app until you redeem it. When you're ready to redeem a drink, follow the prompts and show the bartender the confirmation screen. Once your drink is received, close it out on the app and say thanks. Then, cheers! You just received your first drink on BruYou. Available for download on the App Store and Google Play Store.
Hey everyone, we are back here. Thank you to our friends at BruYou. We are here with Corey, the head brewer. Of course, Marvin is back here. And we're back here in the brew house at Swedesboro. As you can hear, there's all noise of everything firing up and all. So,
Yep.
Corey, tell us about the brew house here.
So we run a 10-barrel specific brewing system. It's steam fired. Allows us to make some beautiful beer. You guys actually hopped in. We're in the end stages of brewing a California Common today. So we should have this available probably beginning part, middle August.
Now tell us California Common. Now that's Anchor Steam is what people should think of.
Yeah. So I'm a Northern
Common?
California guy.
Okay.
By upbringing, and Coors Banquet was probably the very first beer I ever stole out of my dad's fridge, but Anchor Steam was probably two or three.
Okay.
So it's a huge style that I love to make, and Marvin was sharing with me that, as part of as Swedesboro's gotten going, they did a California Common a year ago that did very well. Everybody was happy with it, so we're bringing her back, and I couldn't be happier with this.
It's a great style, and it's not really very prevalent around the breweries. So all of my friends from Ocean County home brewers, who we had a California Common brewing competition that complained to me about it several years ago.
Yeah.
Not everything is all about the hops, okay?
Right.
So tell us about the equipment, etc.
Yeah. So we have a 3-vessel system. Just looking at it, we've got a hot litter tank on the bottom, mash tun on the top, and a boil kettle off to the right. And this is backed up by 5 10-barrel fermenters. And then in the cold box, we have 3 serving tanks that also serve as brights, and 3 bright tanks as well.
Now, as far as the kegging system, the tap room, does that come right from there? You have the lines going through. What do you got? Running through the wall?
Yeah, all through. In fact, if you look up here, you can kind of see the black lines. It's kind of like a linear refrigerating system. So they're all glycol chilled, and they get right to the tap at around 40 degrees.
Now, how much beer do you produce, like on a week? How many brew days do you have?
Typically 2.
Yeah,
as we've been pushing, since I've been here, we've pushed really hard to fill all our taps. Right now we have 18 different beers on tap, and then we're also been pushing hard in distribution. Marvin hired our first sales guy a couple months ago, and Joe's doing a great job getting us on bars all around South Jersey. So it's keeping me busy, which is awesome.
Yeah, we had a Meet the Brewer event last night where we invite bars and restaurants in, and we do a tasting, and we give them a little bit of history and explain the uniqueness of some of our beers. And we're going to do that once a quarter.
Excellent, that's great. What's your favorite beer to brew?
Favorite beer to brew. So my Desert Island beer is Stone Sublimely Self-Righteous.
Okay.
It's a black IPA, which it had its moment in the sun, but anytime they're brewing it right now on a rate of about once a year. And they just brought it back through fan demand. And anytime I find it, I'll fill the car up, and that'll be it. But we have its little brother here called Dark Piney, which was inspired by that beer, and so it's one of our rotational beers and should be around for a long time.
Yeah, dark IPAs, nice beers, very nice beers. They kind of throw you off a little bit. They kind of mess with your head in dark IPA,
right.
Sort of like a white stout.
Right.
Kind of mess with your head. A lot of good ones around though. That's we recently had an IPA competition in my brew club, and some of the older guys like me who don't really do IPAs, they did the black IPA because it was give a little mix of stout and the darker beers as well as IPA.
Yeah, sure.
Maltier, it wasn't a juice bomb, it wasn't a lactose bomb or anything like that.
And like through the right sort of hops, you can balance that roasting and malting that you get off of, and use those traditional West Coast hops to accentuate it and really help those pine and fruit flavors pop a little better. So,
Now, as far as your grain, your equipment, where do you get that from?
Yeah. So our grain primarily comes from Proximity Malt. They're down in Delaware. They do a great job. They have a malt house in Delaware, in Laurel, Delaware, as well as one out in Colorado. They do a wide variety of everything from two-row and Pilsner up to your heavier roasts and things like that. So,
We get a small amount of, they're our main, and they make some great malts. We use Rabbit Hill down the street in Sound County as well. We try to keep some things local, but they're real small batch. So if we need a novelty or a special custom malted grain that may not be available in proximity, we'll reach out.
Yeah. We actually have a smoke beer that we're putting in the tanks next week. That's going to be primarily Rabbit Hill. Yeah.
Okay, Corey, thanks for taking us on a tour of your home every day. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the tap room and we are going to try some of those beers.
Sweet.
Awesome. Sounds
We'll be
great.
right back. Hey, we're back here in the tap room with Marvin, and what you saw is a little shot of the seltzer bar here, which is kind of unique as far as breweries are concerned. I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere, where I guess, Marvin, you just pour them the base seltzer.
Yeah, so we brewed a base seltzer. Really, this is like a living, breathing test pilot. So what we want to find out is before we invest in seltzers, which flavors we're going to go with. And so we made a taster's choice seltzer bar. So you can go up, there's 14 different flavors. We brew a base seltzer. We give direction as to how many pumps of flavor you want to put into it, little mixer. And so you can come in here and have watermelon if you want, or you can have lemon lime. It's really your Steeler's choice.
Very interesting and unique. And actually what might be unique, that might be the first time any of you have seen me talk about seltzer on one of these particular programs. So we're here, we have these beers in front of us. So first I want to talk about the Burroughs Best Pilsner, which I've been drinking here, which is really a delicious, nice, crisp Pilsner. I think you told me this is probably your favorite.
It is my favorite, yeah. And it was bold to come out with a beer, calling it best. But, one of the things I say, having been brewing for some time, is if you want to really evaluate a brewery, you should evaluate them based on their Pilsner, because there's really nowhere to hide. It's such a finicky and pure beer. If you have a lot of hopped beers on the menu, there's a lot of things you can use hops for. One of them is to create distinguished taste that can kind of drown out any other flavors that you may not desire, whereas a light Pilsner is really hard to do that. So. But I'm a beer drinker, and I like to drink a lot of them, so Pilsner is a real easy beer to drink.
Really nice, crisp, classic Pilsner. So let's talk about this flight. Now, these are the flights we talked about earlier. Johnny took some pictures earlier. With I have my cards in front of here. So I guess the first one we got here is I got the Flying Steagle.
Yep.
So let's have some of this. Tell us about this beer.
Sure. So the Flying Steagle, and I got one as well. This is our American lager. When we settled down in Swedesboro, we did our homework on the demographic, and a lot of the people around here weren't really craft beer enthusiasts. And so when people come in here, typically somebody in the crowd will say, I don't drink craft beer, and I would say, good, because we don't make craft beer, we make good beer. And so this was proof to say when somebody came in was asking for kind of an American beer or like a Budweiser or a Miller or something like that, we would say, well, start with a Flying Steagle, our American lager. When I explain this, I just say this is a beer. It smells like beer, it drinks like beer. You want to take a 6-pack of it to the tailgate. That's what kind of beer this is. And then if you want to taste a premium version of this, where you get a little better kind of notes and flavors and profile, I tell them to try a Czech Pilsner or European style lager. And so they go to Burroughs Best. And that's kind of the gateway transition into the craft beers. And then one of the beers that we don't have on the flight here, but I call it the gateway to craft beers, is our New Sweden Blonde Ale. And that's a really mild but has a lot of malt flavor in it in comparison to something like this. Maybe if you're a craft beer drinker, it might seem like on the lower end of flavor. But when you're used to drinking Corona or Budweiser or Bud Light and you drink a blonde, it's a nice gateway or transition into more maltier beers.
Yeah, this has that classic American lager yeast taste in it that you have on it. Nice and crisp, very good beer.
Yeah, it's an everyday drinker, especially the hotter it is and the colder this beer is, the more you want to drink it.
Now, one of the things we ran out of time in the brew house when we were talking to Corey, he had work he had to do also. The yeast, do you harvest any of the yeast
We
here?
sure do. Yeah, yep. We repitch it. We have a lab in the back, so we check cell counts and we measure the vitality of the yeast and everything.
Okay. So tell me about this second beer that
Sure.
we have here.
So that's Three Sisters. Three Sisters is our amber ale. And so as I mentioned earlier about being a home brewer, now I do want to qualify that by saying I was never a great home brewer, and I knew when I needed a professional, and that's what we started with here. But the two beer styles I hold close to my heart are amber ales or red ales and brown ales. They're the two styles that I would brew at home. I was never big on dry hopping, and so these were just easier for me to make, and that's where I started.
Very nice, very nice. Now you have this year-round. This is on tap?
Yeah, so Three Sisters was our, when we first launched, it was one of our first 6 beers, and it was the #2 seller our entire first year in the business. So it's a staple here. We've canned it. It's in bars and restaurants already, and it's one of those flavor profiles that kind of fell out of favor in craft brewing. You know, as the haze craze kind of took over and everything's hoppy, some of these mild malt beers were not as popular, but I feel they're making a comeback, and that's a prime example of one.
Now, you got a beautiful logo on here, so I know there's a story behind this, and I know
Sure.
you love stories, Marvin.
Sure. So, well, I can probably, without spending too much time, kind of share I'll give you a brief history lesson. So when the Swedes came over to America, they were fur trading, and they were using Raccoon Creek here as the primary waterway into Swedesboro. Well, as they started settling, the Swedes were farmers, and they called the area around here barren. In fact, the term pine barren is not a compliment. It literally meant desolate. It meant they couldn't grow anything. And so the Native Americans taught them how to farm the soils in New Jersey. And the 3 crops that they helped them farm was corn, or maize, as it was referred to, soy, or beans, and squash, mainly butternut squash. And so the Narratican Indians would refer to those as their fall harvest as the 3 Sisters. And so those 3 crops are the 3 Sisters. And so we paid homage to the Native Americans with the logo that was drawn after the Narratican tribe. In fact, one of the most flattering experiences we had, the first week we were open, a few members from the Narratican tribe visited here. They did some homework, and they came in. It's always scary, you know, because you try to do your best to represent history, but you don't know what your sources are and how good the information is. And they said that we were spot on with our stories, and they were really proud of what we did.
That's excellent, excellent. Now, we're going to move on to the beers here. Tell us about this one.
Sure. So that's Brewer Select number 4. Brewer Select is an experimental series that we do. The first beer that we brewed, I think you took a picture of it, called Hoppy Weissen, which was a dry hopped wheat ale. And that was Brewer Select number 1. And it's a simple concept. If the Brewer Select that we have on tap outpaces one of our top 3 sellers, so if it's in the top 2, we'll spend the time and the effort to commercialize it, to brand it, to trademark it, to register it with the TTB. If it doesn't, we move on. So we had 4, and I'm happy to say that 2 out of 3 have already been commercialized, and I'm almost certain that this Belgian triple will be one of the top beers that we sell. So it doesn't have a name yet. It's still under the Brewer Select brand. The California Common that you were in there talking to Corey about, that was Brewer Select number 3, and Brewer Select number 3 will be referred to as Steamboat Philly when it's branded.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Now, last but certainly not least, what's this big boy?
Yeah, so that's our Kingsway bourbon barrel aged milk stout. That was the first batch of Kingsway that we brewed, and we sat it in bourbon barrels for 1 year. It's 14.5%. It has a very front-forward note of bourbon. You can smell it, you can taste it, but smooth on the finish, meaning no burn. It's almost unbelievable. It's surprising because the smell, the aroma will intimidate you. It'll make you feel like you're drinking bourbon, but when you drink it, you'll feel like you're drinking a smooth stout.
This is, Richard is not here with me today, my co-host. Richard, you're missing this, my friend. You would love this particular, excellent beer. Wow, this is 14.5%.
Yeah.
Does not taste it, does not taste it.
And that's what's really important. I was always, for me, most beers over 9% kind of leave a lingering alcohol taste in my mouth. And so I was really nervous to go above 9% with any of our beers. And I'm happy to say, with Corey and some of the work that we've done in the back, we have 3 beers that sit over 10%. We have our Scottish Ale, which is referred to as a wee heavy.
A wee heavy, yeah.
So the name of it's Wee Elephant. That sits at around 11%, or no, 10%. And then our Belgian Triple sits at around 11%. And of course our, what we call our Emperor's Cut. So our Kingsway Emperor's Cut, which is our bourbon-aged anniversary beer, sits at 14.5%.
Delicious, delicious. Okay, I think we're going to be wrapping up here. My director is giving me the signal. So, Marvin, Swedesboro Brewing Company. Tell everyone where they can find you, social media, etc.
Sure. So you can find us if you search on Google, Facebook, Instagram, Swedesboro Brewing Company. You will find us. Our handle on Instagram is Swedesboro Brewing Company. Facebook.com/Swedesboro Brewing. And you can find us on the internet at www.swedesborobrewing.com. We're down here on Swedesboro, exit 2 on the Turnpike, or exit 10 on 295. And you just come straight down Kings Highway and you'll find us. 95 Woodstown Road. It's right at the split of Kings Highway and Woodstown Road.
All right. Marvin, thank you so much for having us. Everyone, this is Vic, Vic's Basement Brew. Remember, South Jersey Beer Scene. SouthJerseyBeerScene.com, Facebook, Instagram, and please make sure you check out our YouTube page, which is where this show is. So if you're watching the show, you're on our YouTube page. Just make sure you click that little button that says subscribe. So with that, thank you so much. And Marvin, again, thank you. Johnny, thank you for an amazing job filming as usual. Everyone, we will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.